So it's like the bugs.
He's got the same name, so he filed my taxes. He got my taxes. He's a good guy. He's a good dude. Yeah, he's a good dude.
Left you when you were
Still haven't released the Series X.
Never paid child support. My mom got it back. You remember years ago, it was like national news, and all those guys were stuck in that coal mine. West Virginia. That's my father. Down there for 26 days. And they got, when they got out, they got, you know, they all got like some $80,000, $90,000 settlements. You know what I mean? My mom got all like, she never paid child support.
Thanks,
So my mom finally got it 20-something years later.
Thanks, Dad, for being stuck in the coal mine for 26 years. I'll take it.
Yeah, my mom's got it, bro. She done run up on the cash.
I got 0.99.
Oh. It's coming back at you sometime. You know what I mean? You can't dodge it forever.
We ran
He thought he was about to
0.99.
get with the rest of them down there. I did feel kind of bad for him, though, you know. My mom's got to die. They said that's right too.
I'm literally only
You know,
measuring
the tax system always stops. Has, you know, your ticket for if you get paid out. They're coming for it. He was down there for like 26 days, I think it was. He lived off, he had a full gallon of water. And at his lunch, he had his lunch for that day.
That's pretty good taste.
He had already ate his lunch, but he had like 2 or 3 extra meals, meat and sausage, and a whole roll of Southeast Texas. That's all he has. 20-some days.
And that run around LA business screwed it up.
They were so, dude, he lost like 42 pounds.
920. Still, it's better than.
Yep. Mom's got that check.
I don't know where you were at.
She called me up. She was so happy, bro. It deposited in her bank, same, you know, when it came through, like straight deposit. She called me up. She went and bought a new car the same day.
People probably are social falling out.
All right, so
Anybody got 10 grams of aspirin? I got 100.
I got plenty.
10 grams, yeah.
I want that same 10 grams. Might not have 10 grams. Anywhere between 10 and 30 is a good trick.
Yep. So they say.
We'll start with 10.
all right, let me grab my book.
Might as well just go for 30.
Like, you know what's crazy? It's like,
It hurts, so I want to get rid of it.
I want to almost go buy like generic Dollar Tree aspirin and crush and show you a 30 grams of fucking crushed aspirin.
I just want to try some of that.
Bro, it's a mountain. That would be a straight mountain. Like, it's so hard to do that.
You're talking about like, if you get the extra strength 500 milligram ones, you're talking about 6 months.
That's what's close. I mean, it's not that I can only go back.
So quick announcement real quick. One, we're streaming on YouTube, so I'll record this. Even though we're not on Zoom, we're no longer hybrid. That's a good idea, right? I can record the class and put it on YouTube. So it will be there for you to view. Secondly, exam is going to be I think
Like Monday, don't
no, I'm thinking exam
Tomorrow.
Yeah, thinking tomorrow. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, this material is getting old.
Let's go.
So let's do it tomorrow. And so let's do this then. Let's do this. Let's tomorrow. We will do the review first thing, And then we will test after we do the review. Or we could do the review this afternoon if you guys want to. We'll do this afternoon?
Yeah.
Let's do it right before the
No.
I don't care. You guys tell me.
Let's do it tomorrow, afternoon.
Afternoon it is. So we will do the review this afternoon after lunch. And we will do the exam tomorrow. I think let's just get out of the way to move on to airway. The next thing is you need to bring me, you know what? You gotta have your study guide turn in to do the review. How many nights have you had so far? Yeah.
Just personal stuff, I just have.
Yeah. So look, you gotta manage time. I'll put that out plenty of time, but you know what? Okay, fine. I won't, since I wasn't here to give you prior notice, we will have to do the review then tomorrow. We'll do the review tomorrow. Bring your study guide to turn in. Okay, turn your study guide tomorrow, and remember how I want the study guide legible. So preferably typed up with answers that make sense. Not answers that to one sentence, I can't find it, none of that. Right? It needs to be an intelligent attempt at answering the question. Have that to me tomorrow. That is your ticket to the review. You guys had time to work on it, so you got yesterday. Treasurer Lillard told me. So I don't know what you did with your time. And you had time in some of my days too to work on the study guide. Gotta manage your time. Got to. All right, so that's the way it is right now. That's the way it is right now. To do that, then bring me your study guide tomorrow. We will do a review and then we will test. Got the ebook worked out.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So what we'll try to do today after lunch is set that ebook up, because what you're gonna have to do basically is I'm gonna have to give you a different code and you will log on just like you created the site before. You'll use that my classroom code to get in. You're welcome. I tried to help. When somebody says something to help them, I try to do that. All right. So any questions so far? Because we're about to walk through this process.
How many questions is the exam?
I think it's about as big as the last one, 60 or 70, if I had to guess. But
I was looking into about hypoglycemia.
yeah,
Whether or not you would be on
yeah, that I'm gonna have to look at that, because that I think that might have been a typo on my part. They can. They can go both ways. I didn't mean to confuse anybody about that.
Yesterday I talked to
Dr. Lillard about it.
Dr. Lillard, and
Yeah.
he talked to Riggs about it. They said because it's low blood sugar will start attacking your brain, then it will start attacking your respiratory system. That it will start off as acidosis, and then it'll be a really long time before it gets to alkalosis.
Right.
That's what they said.
Dixon, take your letter ready for Kat. Can you go turn it in? And I'll wait for you to slide back in here. I'll start going slow. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to look at that because I didn't want to. I think what I really wanted you to understand is hyperglycemia, and metabolic acidosis. So I will. So let's see, what number is that on your study guide?
9.
Number 9. where it says, please choose either acidosis or alkalosis from the following conditions. So antacid, obviously we know what that is. Correct. Or just alkalosis. Hyperventilation. Yeah. Diabetic ketoacidosis. Yeah. And hypoglycemia, just mark that off. All right, mark it off. Yeah, mark that one off.
This may be a stupid question.
No.
But I'm asking you. The definitions on the study guide, that's essentially kind of like when you used to go through and give us the major definitions at the end.
That's it. There'll be something though on the exam with that definition. So that's why it's important to know it.
Thank you.
Talking from the study guide, he was asking a general question about definitions.
Bunch of definitions on the study guide.
Structure.
Yep.
Since the review's tomorrow, I know we're using general like electrolyte numbers and balances until we get to IVs. and stuff.
No, don't worry about the electrolyte numbers, but the electrolytes that are on the study guide will be the ones that you need to know about. And basically what we've talked about so far, right? Potassium, primarily intracellular ion, sodium, extracellular, calcium, opens the door, right?
That little, school PowerPoint is not. legit. I want to look at it.
I'll put it back on.
The only thing that, the only difference was this, that thin flabby dilated and large part.
Flabby. Me.
Yeah, okay, sick bay. Yeah. Doesn't work. They're not. It's telling
Did you do the entire thing in Flash yesterday?
Okay, so here we have our bacterial cell, but we can now introduce this because we know what it is. Right? And this is an antigen. And what antigen is defined, what does it mean? What does antigen mean? Invader, right? So foreign, right? Foreign, and the body's going to recognize it as foreign. This happens to be a bacterial type cell, but it doesn't matter because it's foreign. All right, and so our cell goes to work, right? Releasing toxins that's going to damage, in this case, skin cells, but it could be any type of cell. All right, so what is this little guy?
Mast cell.
Mast cell, right? And so this mast cell is going to pick up on what? What's this stuff called?
Spider acid.
It's going to start picking up on this stuff here, and it's going to produce those endotoxins, right? And what are those endotoxins called? Right, chemical mediators. And what's one? Histamine. Leukotrienes. Prostaglandins.
Oh, yeah, it's Keenan. There's an E in there.
It's in that.
All right. And so these guys as a whole are going to come up here and they're going to interact in this case with the blood vessel, and they're going to cause the membrane to do what? Is it going to
Permeate.
become more permeable, right? And it does that by, you're right. Whoever said contract, these cells are now going to contract, right? And so they're going to contract. And now we know that with that gap here, we're going to have stuff leaking out. What's going to be leaking? Right. Got some plasma leaking out. So that's going to cover our edema part. Right. And so with that being said, what's some other signs and symptoms? So edema, swelling, heat, pain, and we're getting the pain because of those pain sensors, right? That's exactly right. Edema is pushing down on those pain receptors, causing that pain, heat. Heat comes from what? That's right. The blood temperature, right? All right. So all of that's pretty good. And so then we talked about our flag system. These flags go up. And what's the purpose of these guys? What are they going to do? All right. Exactly right. So it's going to help, right? It's going to help us to slow these guys down, because at the end of the day, they lock in together, right? And so somebody said margination. What does that do? Cause that roll, right? So these vessels are normally right down the center of the path, right? And so it changes their direction to pull them down into the fight, because what are they going to want to do? Yeah, we need to fit through these cells to get in. And what is that called? Transmigration.
Also known as fire.
Diaphoresis. Exocytosis. So now we see how we get the symptoms of being sick, right? Now, now we're going to talk a little bit about how the immune response is going to work, okay? And so we talked about how we have our cell here, right? And we talked about how how endocytosis is going to work, right? We talked about these arms of the cell, right? Man, pen is really. And it's just going to like receive this bacterial cell. And what's it going to do? Going to eat them, right? Right. So he brings them in. And what's that called? That process called? Phagocytosis. And what does that phagocytosis really mean?
They break down.
Cell eating.
Cell eating. Right.
Oh,
All right. And so once this cell kind of returns to its normal look here, right? This is your macrophage, right? And so we said that inside that macrophage we have lysosomes, right? And that lysosome breaks down the cell wall of this bacteria, right? Right. All right. So what this macrophage is going to have to do, though, is, well, it does. It needs to kick it out, but it can also present it on its cell as well, as a receptor in a way. Yep, it is a protein. So it's up here. Okay, it's up here now. Process is complete. But it needs somebody that can come along and interact with this protein. It needs a immunity type cell. And so these are called B cells. And it needs some help. Yes. Yep. It needs help though too. So scientists were like, how could we come up with a name that would remind us that this B cell needs help? That's after long, long deliberation, many hours of study at high intellect levels. They came up with the name, let's call it a helper T cell. Yep. It was an idea that was just unbelievable. Shocked the world. All right, so here's our proteins. So our proteins now will react with this B cell and with the helper T cell. Now, even though so I want you to, that's what they do. All right. And so what it's going to do really, so from this, at this point, it's going to create something. And these are more B cells, but they have kind of a different type job description, but nonetheless, they're not. Let me back up. So let me back up. So what we're going to do is through this B cell and this helper T cell, we're going to create a different type of immunity cell. Let's call it that. I'm trying not to confuse you guys. All right, and so this is going to be called a plasma cell. And this guy down here is going to be called a memory cell. Hang in there, it's okay. But they're in the B cell family. They're in the B cell family. And so the memory cell says, you know what? This is like that person in your life who remembers everything. Mine's my wife. She remembers everything. Everything, dude. So I kind of like to think of this guy right here as a person who keeps up with the recipe. I don't know if I spelled this right. You know what I mean? It's the recipe. All right. They're going to keep up with the recipe, meaning they're going to remember exactly the reaction of this, whatever disease process this might be. Go ahead, sir. The memory cell is a B cell, if you want to put it in the category. It is a part of a B cell. It is an immunity type cell. So it's going to keep up with the recipe of how to create a response to this certain antigen. And the plasma cell is going to actually create antibodies. Right, and so your book almost kind of gets you confused a little bit because it says that it considers immunoglobulins, right? Unless otherwise, it considers those antibodies as well. So don't get too confused on it. Just understand that this is going to create antibodies, right? And so where we're at now is this is what this is called is humoral immunity. And what we have so far in your book, just to catch you up, We have the macrophage that engulfs the antigen via phagocytosis. We know what that is now. We're good there. So if you go to the second step, it says the antigen binds to the B cell and the helper T cell. Well, that's what we've got right here. We've got a helper T cell and we have a B cell. Here's your antigen. They're binding to it. Okay, cool. We're good there. And then that third step is, it says the activated helper T cell. All right, and I'm fixing to show this. Right, it secretes something called lymphokine. And that lymphokine it's that lymphokine that wants that B cell to clone itself. Okay, it wants it to clone itself. And it makes two identical cells that have different functions. And so those different functions are the plasma cell. And let me back this lymphokine up because actually it shouldn't be here. It should really be right here. Lymphokine. PH. K-I-N-E. All right, so it's that lymphokine that causes, it secretes, it makes this B cell make a clone of itself, but the clone of itself is going to separate. Even though it's a B cell, we're going to call it a plasma cell up here, and we're going to call it a memory cell down here. And it clones itself, plasma cell, which makes the antibodies, and I'll show you that in a second. And the memory cell, which it says it remembers the initial encounter with the antigen, meaning it remembers that encounter and keeps a recipe of the proteins that it's going to need to beat it the next time it comes in. So the antibodies then, they look like a Y sort of. And they have these little branches that kind of connect them, right? All right, so I have these little branches. We'll talk about that in a second. But that is part of the humoral immunity response. Now, we're still on that. Now we're going to talk about specifically how these antibodies work. All right, how do these antibodies up here on this plasma cell work? And it's pretty straightforward. It's not too hard to understand, really. All right, so we have our bacterial cell here again with the antigen. Well, antigens up here. All right, so here we are, and it says, so through a process called opsonization. I'll write that out here. Opsonization. It's OPSONIZATION. And I've already been spelled.
Still on the same page, 339?
I'm on 340 now. Opsonization. All right, so. So what it can do now is it can actually coat this antigen. All right. It says that it can actually coat the antigen. And basically what it's doing is chemically tagging it. So it can chemically tag it. And so this will be for later. This is so it'll chemically tag it for a killer T cell to come by and deal with it. So I always think about, like, when I try to put this in perspective. So in the military, what are they called? Forward air controllers, right? And so forward air controllers, they carry the thing where they can actually laser a position. They can laser a position with a laser and get the exact coordinates of that position that they can relay to air support. And they can say, okay, here's the coordinates for this target. We want this target destroyed. We're receiving, fire from this target. So here's the coordinates, destroy it. And so air support says, okay, no problem. And they come in, drop a bomb on that target. Boom, destroy. Go ahead. Well, the analogy I'm trying to come up with here is that optimization is your forward air controller. They can chemically tag a cell that has an antigen on it that needs to be destroyed. So they chemically tag it and say, hey, killer T cell, that would be your air support. Please come by, bomb the hell out of this target. Killer T cell says, no problem, we got you. All right, get your men down. This is danger close. Okay. Get your men down. All right, so opsonization, that's what it does. All right, it labels that antigen so that other immune cells will attack them. Okay, that's pretty cool, right? So some other things it can do. Remember, we talked about the phagocytosis part, right? So that's when your macrophage comes along and eats it, right? Well, what it can also do is that it can come along and help these antigens to, what is the word they use? I want to say constrict, but it's not. They can cause, it just says it causes them to clump. Causes those antigens to clump, and that makes it easier for the macrophage to engulf it. No. You can have more macrophages come along and eating, but usually it's a one-at-a-time process.
So opsonization can cause them to clump.
Yes.
It made it sound like they could eat a bunch of them at the same time
Well,
yesterday.
I mean, as far as I know,
Okay.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I think it's a one-on-one thing. All right, so it could help them to clump, which is pretty cool. Now, what it can do, though, you see these little tentacle things. So they're in this process of chemically tagging it. Sometimes by just doing that, because bacteria is some bacteria are so sensitive that through that process of chemically tagging it, it might actually destroy the bacteria itself. It's not because it carries enzymes to do that. It's just a process of chemically tagging it. Sometimes they're so sensitive that it might actually destroy it altogether through that process. All right. So it says antibodies bind to the inactives and inactivate some toxins. But the macrophage is still going to come by, pick it up, ingest it, do its thing with it. Yes, I'm sorry.
So oxidation. Alcohol. What?
Um,
Other cells to tags it, until it says. Destroy it.
Yes, oxidization, well, oxidization can definitely describe the chemically tagging it, yeah. Oxidization provides the clumping process, yes. And yeah, so it is all under oxidization, yes.
And sorry, one other thing.
No, go ahead.
When the B cell and the helper T cell make those two clones.
Yep.
I don't want to say clone cells, but picture them out here on that previous page. It looks like there's 4 cell.
Okay, and that's true. That's true. I didn't draw it out specifically, but it's in that process of cloning. So yes, it would be just like that. It would be the 4 cells. I'm just drawing out one at a time, try to help out.
It's not actually the helper T has anything to do with cloning. That's just.
No. Right. It's just that. And so the helper T is going to do one or two things. It's either going to activate that process,
Okay.
right? It
Or
actually
activate
act
it.
right. It's like it says, okay, you have permission, clone, or you have permission, attack. I'll get you quicker.
Viruses can
We are very vague on the viral thing because viruses are tricky. And the reason why they're tricky is because certain viruses can change the DNA structure of the cell. So they're a little trickier than a bacteria. A bacteria is a standalone deal. It's got its own program, its own DNA. It doesn't rely on me, the host, to do anything. It's living, reproducing, all that. A virus is dependent upon me staying alive. It's dependent upon it achieving the process of making it into the cell, rewriting DNA, and being able to reproduce that cell with the same DNA it's going to rewrite over and over and over. But what happens is T cells eventually get its game. They figure out, oh, okay, we see what you're doing. We see what you're doing, and we're done with it. And we're going to put you down, right? But there is no support from the outside world usually for viruses because of that. Because antibiotics are written, the recipe is of ingredients to assist with a bacterial response. We don't have an antibiotic we can throw in a viral because we don't understand exactly how it's changing the DNA of that cell.
say it's kind of a point in time, but that one is actually like tougher because it just doesn't community over antibiotics.
That is true. How that happens is this usually. Let's say I have a strep throat type gram-negative bacteria. And I take, and so I go to the doctor, and sure enough, I got strep throat, comes back positive. And they're like, okay, we're going to give you some antibiotics. We're going to give you some amoxicillin. You need to take 10 days of this amoxicillin. Like, okay. Let's say I take 5 days of it, and I'm feeling so much better that I forget that I'm sick. I need to finish that. So I go, you know what? I'm feeling so much better. I really don't need to finish this antibiotic. I'm good. But what happens is bacteria is not stupid. You've taken 5 days and you've killed 80% of it. You put a big dent in it. And so what will happen is the rest of the bacteria, the 20% that still remains, we'll say, okay, we know that amoxicillin kicked our ass last time. Let's rewrite a script to where amoxicillin, if reintroduced to us, will not hurt us. Okay, they can lay dormant for months to years. I get sick again, it builds back up. I go to the doctor. Mike, we see you're here 5 years ago for strep throat. We gave you amoxicillin. How did that work for you? Oh, it worked great. Yeah, it worked good. So there's understanding. Maybe you took the full 10-day dose like you were supposed to. And so they're okay. Well, we're going to give you amoxicillin again. It worked good 5 years ago. It should work good now. They give it to me. I take 3 days of it. And I'm sicker than hell because it's not working at all. And I continuously get sicker and sicker. Now I'm in the emergency department. And so what I may even be septic at this point. Right? This thing may now have moved on from that to attacking a different organ. So what do? Well, now they're going to give me a different antibiotic. Now, if I've been to the doctor a bunch and this same process has happened, several antibiotics will not work. So they will draw blood and they'll put it in a petri dish that's lined with several different antibiotics. And they'll watch that bacteria grow. They'll take over the first line because that was amoxicillin. And maybe your second one was Keflex. It's going to grow over that. But the third one may be Levaquin. And it doesn't get past Levaquin. And they go, okay, give the person Levaquin. And Levaquin works. But that's how it works. That's why they call it antibiotic resistant Staphylococcus. But you can kind of see how that is now, right? How this stuff works. All right, so if you look at your book on 341, table 8-5, it will list out these different antibodies. Okay, you have the IgG, the IgA, and it basically just kind of tells you how these receptors, how they're the most common, some that aren't as common. And so basically that is where the humoral immune response stops and where cell-mediated immune response begins. It's cell-mediated because now we're going to have T cells. Yes. We have a T cell here. It's been activated by the helper T cell. It's got all the information that it needs. And this T cell can go to this antigen. It can directly hunt out the antigen and destroy it. If the antigen is displayed on a macrophage, it can come by and destroy it. Right? And so that is how the killer T cells work, right? That is what they do. They will attack the antigen on the macrophage. Now, couple things. Well, that's just FYI. If that antigen is displayed on that macrophage, and that killer T cell is trying to kill it, but it's just not working out too good, then the killer T cell has the authority to go ahead and take out the macrophage. It doesn't want to, right? Because it knows it's important. But if it has to, it will take out the macrophage as well. And so if you're doing lab work, you can kind of see where somebody is in the infection process. If I pull up some lab work and I see that my macrophages are low, my killer T cells are high, that means memory cells, right, are working on telling this plasma cell to clone itself, make a lot of killer T cells, and I got low macrophages. That means these guys, they're getting their butt kicked. This is a serious bacterial infection that we're dealing with, right? We can see that. So that's how you kind of know. Or you see, you may have a high level of macrophages and your T cells aren't, they're normal, right? That means we're probably at the beginning process of the infection, right? Macrophages are there, they're kicking ass, they're doing their thing, but T cell activation hasn't. So that could tell us a couple things. We might be looking at a virus, right? Because killer T cells aren't activated yet. So a couple, kind of leads us down the road. Where are we at with this process? So that's kind of how you can see that. We talked about the helper T cells. We talked about memory T cells. We haven't really talked too much about suppressor T cells, but suppressor T cells keep macrophages in check. Macrophages, they get carried away sometimes.
Surrounding tissue.
Yeah, they started saying everybody, it's kind of like a bacteria. We're just going to start eating it all. And they're like, hold on.
It's like a house renovation.
Yeah. That's good. Exactly right. And so they're like, hold on, you're doing good, but chill out a little bit. Do your thing, eat what you need to eat. Give those B cells a chance to come along and tag the stuff. Remember, we're here to help. That sort of thing. All right, and so I kind of like to go back just a little bit because we kind of described this is the process of hopefully getting better. And so here's our brain right here. And I kind of want to talk about interleukin-1. Y'all remember what interleukin-1 does? Right. It's the backup, right? It says, hey, we need other white blood cells here, right? There's a lot of eating to do. Well, inside your brain, you have a temperature control part of your brain. Anybody know what it's called? Huh? So it's called the hypothalamus. All right, and so part of the immune response, remember, bacteria is delicate in some ways. If you work in a lab and you're trying to grow bacteria for some type of experiment, you can jack up your experiment sometimes because it's sensitive. And one of the things that it's sensitive to is heat, right? It loves a warm temperature. It doesn't like it too hot. It likes it warm. 98.2 is perfect. It loves 98.2, because that's the general area of our temperature. Well, the body again knows this, and when it has interleukin-1 out here that's put off by these cells, interleukin-1 does something else too. It's like, hey, let me let the hypothalamus know what's going on. And once it activates the hypothalamus will increase body temperature. And this is where fever comes from. That is where your fever comes from, interleukin-1. Let's take 15 minutes. Yeah.
What cell releases interleukin-1?
It's going to be your macrophages and your leukotriene. I mean, your leukocytes. Those are the two that will release interleukin-1. Yeah, I don't think it mentioned fever.
Yeah, it doesn't mention.
And I just want you guys to know that's where fever comes from, just so you can put infection together. Like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, so if you're at home and sick and you have a fever, you can know in your mind, okay, interleukin-1 is giving me this fever. What's up? And it's probably because your white blood cells have been activated. It could still be viral. May not be bacteria, but that's where too they get from fever with bacterial infections that say are so much higher. And the reason why that is because you got all these macrophages, right, and leukocytes that are all over the place. If they're all over the place, that means interleukin-1 is really producing. It's probably a bacterial infection they're responding to. All right, so take you 15 minutes. We'll come back. Absolutely.
Chemo test is portion of
Should
the-
suffice. Yeah, that's
just where the macrophage finds the bacterial cell, right? What links them together.
Where's she? Where?
I skipped over that.
Yeah. Hey, I said, well, hell, let me call her. She said, well, just ask. She said, hey, I'll direct that.
Or something.
I said, hey, we get a ambulance there. She's like, "Well, it's me. I have to make a check on her out." So, we're down with my father-in-law. I'm going here with my father-in-law. I got a couple of stairs. So I ran out. So he was pretty good. Like, let's see. So weird.
Thanks, I don't- it's bad as well.
It worked out.
What's stressing you out? Something's gotta be. Because I know that, I mean, because like you lose your wallet or, I mean, me, when I was off, I didn't- Okay.
I want to say thank you
Oh, Jenkins, God.
He comes over, he walks over, and he's about to open his mouth and say a word.
I don't eat all the crap. That's when you had nothing.
That's not what I actually
Side good part, right? You're gonna be behind. You're gonna be like, I've heard of it. God, did you imagine getting plus?
No.
Man. Oh, really?
Just whatever you know. Oh, yeah. Or actually, close to it.
It's flatter.
You guys, someone's study guide. Hey, look, you got a forever stamp.
He's not gonna be detailed. I'm pretty sure he's not fine. Might be fine. I don't know.
I'll tell you what it is.
Hey, this is probably, I like. I mean, what's he, what he? Like the one say it about it. Yeah, I figured it would be like. Like said, yeah.
328.
What number? What number? What number?
The key phase of protein.
How'd you do, brother?
Come here.
Huh?
Come here.
How'd that happen?
Hey, what cell am I?
Big bitch.
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm on,
I want to read it. So I didn't put my copy. That's the hard part. Made it look like I saw the part before. But it didn't look like her part.
19 and
It's like a
61.
shit. Yeah.
I think I Googled.
Oh, yes, you do. But that was like.
19 and 61. I mean, of course, 19 and then
17.
I didn't write a page number.
Got right.
I think I Googled that. I really used it.
I didn't know.
Put a lot down. But that's- Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they something. I wouldn't buy that. I wouldn't buy that. Shoot, you ain't got time to split it. I mean, I have to test them all. So, it don't make a difference. But I mean, if you gonna take the test today, right, are you gonna study more for B? Because you was gonna take the test today. So to me, that means you don't need to study. The EMT did. I don't think you should. I don't think you should wait. You did. So, I think you should taste Friday. Got more time to study. Maybe you get on your ass for it. What's the second one? Did they send those? I didn't know. So.
Yeah.
Kind of like, you feel it. I want to see how I can take it. I might use it. Like I might use it kind of guy. Yeah, like guy what I'm
I always. No way.
Take my time. What was that question? They question. I'm like, okay, chance. Instead of explain, get this shit. Oh boy, quick. Almost 116.
Well, smiling.
Ask.
Really? Which one's that? Which one's that?
Man, come on. So I'm gonna connect to
Class leader?
no. I'm gonna connect to with I'm gonna connect to with my daycare. My daycare is my son. Daycare with son. Daycare. Yeah. I'm gonna connect to him. I'll hold him. It's my business. All right. So it's only that. I'm here to go to this city for like 2 days. This thing's paid. Go to see for an hour and a half. You can make, yeah, man. That's his life pass. Mask. Yeah, I'm actually started using my elevation mask, get used to it. So he says, "Well, she'll shake it." I'm just, you know, sucks, man.
Somebody fell out.
Now he had to. Dude, system like I have half of the answers already recently on my yesterday. It's like I'm expecting him to say, "Okay, guys, just like live test or."
What did he fail?
Yeah, he just came out so I can take
What part of it?
You
You like some event, kept failing it?
Yeah, they do it. They say they do it. It comes out of high level.
Yeah, I
He do it too. That's what I say, you know what I mean? Like, don't come out strong. Okay, well, you know. I'll have it. So on the side. I mean, it's like a fucking good person.
Oh,
It is, but it's like.
Yeah.
Lots more than the others.
I look at that email, like, Friday, to see if the numbers go down, get the shit on Friday.
They're 27.
So there's 26 on. You know what I mean? It's like,
But still, the same time, it's like, they've lost a lot.
yeah, I agree with that.
Say, we're right.
I did that right after.
Yeah.
I had it sit.
I mean,
And more people like stop.
I mixed in the chapter and I'll try to, I mean, it's if I see a word that I don't understand, I'll do it that way. I got everything else. I read it and I took notes on it. I think what I want to do this time is I'm gonna not go to the and see how I do, because if he's gonna keep doing it to where you gotta get the study guide to get the review, and if I can get like a B or an A on it, then I'll just do what I've been doing. It's not do this. If I don't do good, then I'll go to the written session. But I don't think that's gonna happen. I think I'm gonna do about the same.
We cleared that. It might not.
Yeah.
Right. You get your ID in here? Oh, you did? Or was it?
I told you.
I told you. How did it get in there?
See that? It's like a ferret.
Well, he was just waiting for you to throw that shot.
Oh, there's something bad, man. I have no idea what's going on. It's proper. I didn't study that. Yeah, I you ever have that stuff on Friday? They do. I swear to God, I'm not even trying. Yeah, I found cardboard boxes. My boys were like just playing with them for hours. They're like hiding them. They're like build stuff with it. My daughter.
They were
She got COVID, y'all.
I get food trucks.
Yeah, mine are like, they're like stuck in my cheeks too.
I swear to God, it's
They're actually bad. 4 and 5.
right up the cat. I'm gonna say my daughter has COVID.
Oh, can you come and kiss me then? Oh.
3 to 4 weeks. I do, I got notice. I might not go to drill, goddammit. You're a fucking genius, man. I might be virtual.
All right, guys, let's do push-ups while I eat my chips.
You gotta come in. You gotta come in.
How long do you work for during the day on job?
Oh, babe, from like 6 till about 6 to 6.
You go there that morning, or do you go Friday? No, you're not a real soldier.
Still in the morning.
Thank you. It's not a television.
You stay there Saturday.
I come home. I go back to the.
Are there guys that do stay there?
Yeah, there's guys. that-
Yeah.
I had a buddy that was trying to he would leave like Friday night. to go to the job.
Yeah, they do that for some people. I'm local. I gotta do that. Although some of the entry level,
Yeah, everyone else is nervous.
Jake. What do you use?
he does not.
Yeah, or you can just start.
I love Jesus, bro. You like Tabasco ones?
Oh,
Damn!
yeah, boy.
Hey, what you plan on working out? That's a lot of people. I might pop out. I might take a day. But not necessary. I say that right now, but I just don't feel like I'm You're a bitch.
Yeah, I'll plan on doing
Yeah. I mean, we don't have PT program, so better day to do legs. Even though they'll hurt the following day worse, which is back to Fuck it. Fuck it. I need to break out my veins anyway, bro.
Yeah.
Maybe. I'm about to use my whole lunch break though. I ain't gonna take a lunch break. Maybe.
Good idea.
No time off.
Honestly.
Take that.
Shit focus.
Bloom on camera slides.
Once I'm passing this, I'll get back. Probably following the rest of the week, I'll be. He's gotta be smart. and do it too.
It's on camera. So. I mean, wait.
All right, so we talked about interleukin-1, how it produces a fever. Yeah. All right. All right, so if you want to know too, so leukocytes, they're this is the protein that really goes in and causes the inflammation in the lungs. Right, causes bronchial constriction. And when we talked about too, how it, between the histamine also causing the smooth muscle relaxation or smooth muscle dilation, right? So that's where you get the leakage and all that. But if we talked about a situation where we had a hypersensitivity reaction, what am I talking about here? What do we know this as? If we're super hypersensitive to something. Yes, you're right. Anaphylaxis. And so the same players are involved here. They just, again, an inflammation process is normal. It allows for those white blood cells to have transmigration, right? It brings them into the fight. All of that stuff we need to happen. So this would be a normal response in the inflammation response. And we talked about how the immunity works now. We see that. But if we have a response that we're super hypersensitive to, that means that what we've talked about so far with the increase in permeability and all that, it's like gonna supersize. It's gonna go ham. You're gonna have all kinds of plasma leaking. You're going to have these leukotrienes that are going to be attacking these lungs, causing that bronchial constriction, right? And can't forget too about constriction up here of the trachea. Right, so when you have a hypersensitivity reaction, so your book talks about it too. It talks about how these antibodies are created, right? And remember, let's go back over here and look at this. The memory cell. So the memory cell, it's like if I get stung by a bee, yellow jacket, whatever, get stung, those antibodies are created. They're created so they will remember the response if I get stung again, right? Well, all of that's there, so I get stung again. And those antibodies have been floating around, just waiting for an opportunity for that to happen again. And they're hypersensitive to wherever that venom is. And there's your anaphylactic reaction. Go ahead, sir. Opsonization. Yeah, just know that all three of those things I covered it chemically tags the antigen, right? It can destroy the antigen through chemically tagging it if the antigen was, sensitive. Yes, sir. Good question. I was hoping that we would talk about that, right? Really was. Something that we would talk about how, so that's exactly how that works. That's exactly how the COVID vaccination works. That's exactly how smallpox vaccination works. That's how any vaccination out there works. It gives you a small, either synthetic, now we can do, synthetic type response, or even the COVID one was a pretty advanced form, right? Because, and it kind of has to be, because, we're dealing with a virus here. So it has to kind of affect the DNA of your cell. But that's exactly what happens. It goes in, it has your memory cell learn the recipe, and it has the plasma cell build antibodies. So the next time that you get exposed to COVID, on a chance at an exposure that you would normally contract COVID, okay? You would normally contract it, and you still may, right? You still may, because it comes in. Problem is, a lot of times when you've had this immunization, you don't know you have it. Why? Because plasma cells are sitting there with the antibodies. As soon as it comes in, boom, it's done. Over. And so you didn't even get symptomatic. Now, there's cases with folks who've received vaccinations since the time we created the first vaccination. And you see it even with the chickenpox vaccination, where they'll, like chickenpox, where they'll actually break out a little bit. Not feel bad, and go, hey, Mom, Dad, what is this stuff? And there might be 5 or 6 little, chickenpox, and that's it. Because it, took a second for those memory cells to release the plasma cells to go out and do what they need to do. But there's times where you don't even react. And so what ends up happening is you reduce the number of times the disease is around. So you get to the point to where it's not around that much at all. And 1 in a million catch it like that. They'll actually react a little bit. And so it starts becoming unheard of. Just like smallpox. Right? Venture to say nobody in this room knows anybody's had smallpox. Well, before the vaccination. And if you and maybe you do know of somebody who might have, like, but very rare. Very, very rare. Now, we talk about we've talked about vaccinating for hepatitis, which I thought was weird, because we went from seeing kids, not kids anymore, to adults. And I was like, what's up with that? And they're like, well, it's been here. And the fact is, though, now kids are done with it, and the only folks you see occasionally will be an adult, a rarity. Adult, every now and then we get it. And you go, wow. And so that's what I remember going through that process of seeing an adult every now and then with it. Otherwise, I would have never seen. That's kind of weird. So yeah, so these diseases, that's how it works. And so me and my wife had this little thing all the time. She just can't let it go. Can't let it go. Somebody she knows who got COVID that was vaccinated. I tell her every time, babe, doesn't mean you don't catch it, because you might. And the symptoms of COVID, what? Could be anything. So if I have a scratchy throat and a little sinus infection, a little feeling like that, if you swab my throat, my nose, it might come back positive for COVID. It might. And so, yeah, if I run to the doctor with those mild symptoms and they check me for COVID, I might come up with COVID, even though I've been vaccinated. I tell her every time. Without that, it might have landed this person in the hospital. It might have progressed to something different. And so that's how vaccinations work. And so remember this, because this is fact. I can't doctor it, right? Because it's so weird going to work at the hospital. We are the spear of the scientific community. And they're freaking out about masks. And I'm like, I get where you're going with it. I get it. But I knew about this before COVID from, college. Wasn't too that long ago for me. So I was kind of, I can't pull up all the enzymes. And that's what I was talking about this morning with Instructor Lillard and Instructor Riggs. I can't pull up all the enzymes anymore. I can't go there in depth, but I remember this part because my biology teacher, this was a time where folks were not wanting to vaccinate their children when they were talking about the polio vaccines. Yeah. And dude, she threw it out. And when you go into the science, you look, vaccinations, man, they're, are a way to go because that's how they work. And so I guess because she taught it so like that, I remembered how that part of it. And so it's so weird too, because remember I told you about your neighbors? Your neighbors know you work for the fire department. They do. They know you're a recruit right now, and they don't really know what recruit means. They just know you work for the fire department. And as soon as you get hired by the fire department, you know everything. And you may not believe this now, but you wait. Because my door there, all the time. And my wife jokes, she's like, we should just open a clinic. Because there's all the time people coming down, hey, I have a question about this, blah, blah, blah. And so why you would pick up firemen to come down here and ask us too, I don't know. Really, I don't know why you would, but they come. And I think, though, it's important. That's why I always say, set a good example. Try out, because they know. They know. That if there's a PD unit in your driveway, they're like, that horrible. Yeah, so they know. And so what I'm saying is this, is that if you have to explain the science behind something, then explain it the best you can, right? But that's the science. Now, I'm always open. If the science changes, please tell me. Educate me. I'm willing to learn. But as of right now, this is the way I was taught. That's the way this book teaches. That's how immunizations work. Now, my wife, and I don't know, she probably never watched YouTube, but if she did, well, she watched it because I'm watching. But if she did, she would agree with everything I want to say. And she is a conspiracy theorist. So she has other reasons why she will not get the shot. And that's okay. I don't care. Right? And I don't even argue with her on that. Whatever. Every person is the same. Right? If that's what you're going to believe, what you believe. But I'm telling you, the science behind this doesn't change. It doesn't care about your opinion. It's like math. 2 + 2 is 4. It's 4. You're not ever going to have 3.5 out of that. You're not going to have 4.2 or 3.9. It's 4. You can't change it. It's the way it is. Now, again, vaccines, I'm sure there's a study out there that 0.38% fully reacted to this. Fully reacted to COVID after being vaccinated. But I would challenge that by saying, who provided the vaccination? Was there aseptic technique used? Did they use the right thing when they wiped your arm? You know what I mean? There might have been something weird. And the vaccinations sometimes are weird. If they get too warm, they will not work. So if they were sitting outside, big line, they got a big dose box of it out, If it doesn't stay at that temperature, it only has a half-life of once it reaches a certain temperature of so long and it will die. So there's other things too, and I'm not trying to be a proponent of it. I'm just teaching the science behind it. But I don't even like to go there with those. I just think it's weird. It's just weird to me that I work with people that are supposedly educated at the hospital, and it's like, and you'll see this out there, and you're going to run into these folks. There's physicians, especially, and they don't keep up. They still practice medicine like they did when they graduated. But we did have one encounter yesterday at the hospital with an AEMT, and that there was an EMT involved that was a student of mine at one point in time. They graduated from my class and doesn't work here anymore. Works for Rockdale County, I think. And they brought a patient in, a diabetic hypoglycemic patient. And what they did was they brought the emergency to the emergency room. And they could not get an IV established. And either was too intimidated to use the IO gun to start an IO, or was too lazy to do it, or was too incompetent to do it. That's the only three choices. Again, that's the three, in my eyes, right? And so I was shocked though because our physicians usually don't say a word. They just don't. But one of our physicians actually said, it was to my former student as they were leaving, the fire guys were heading out. He was like, hey, excuse me, next time you're presented with a situation like that, please, use your IO gun. It's in your level of training. It's under your scope of practice, which I'm about to faint. I mean, they're using words that scope of practice and all that, which is really good for them, and they're like, really, I'm not joking. And they're like, use that next time and then administer the D50, please. Don't do that anymore. And they're like, hold on. That's my instructor. And I'm an EMT. I'm not advanced yet. And I was like, he's not. That's the other person down the hall. He's like, oh, okay. Sorry, guys. Have a good day. But y'all are going to be A's. And so I was shocked that he actually intervened. So a lot of times they won't. So it's up to you guys to keep up with this stuff. It's up to you guys to understand your scope of practice. Nobody else is going to. All right. Sorry. Get on. Gotta get back. All right. Yes, sir.
Explaining the difference between humoral immunity and
cell mediated? Absolutely not a problem. So the way I keep it separated out, that once you get over here, you have B cells, right? The plasma cells, they are chemically tagging the cell to be destroyed, or they're chemically tagging it to help with the macrophage to come along and consume it. This is the process of getting ready for cell-mediated immunity, meaning this is preparing the T cells to come along and practice cellular immunity. It's the T cell that will come along and destroy the antigen. Does that help? Because that's how I look at it, cell-mediated.
So essentially, a cell-mediated immune response is really T-cell-mediated immune
That's
response.
exactly how I look at it.
after
Humoral, right. That's the way I kind of see it in my head, because the T cell is that. I think of that as a T cell. I think of opsonization and all that as part of something else, even though it's cellular, right? But it's not resolving the problem. It's getting ready to resolve it. It's getting players lined up But at the end of the day, unless it gets lucky, it doesn't resolve it. It's the actual T cell that does. Yes, sir.
That's the same as CD8.
Yeah. Yeah, so the CD8, let me flip over there. That might be the helper T cell. What's that? That's the thing. Let me flip over there. Somehow I got lost. Here. All right.
What page?
Yeah, 341. 341? You're on 347?
Sensitized T cells, CD8.
Hang on 1 second, because I think we're in the hypersensitivity response here.
The second paragraph on 347.
Autoimmune reactions, or am I need to come up? Targets of hypersensitivity reactions. Sure, I got you. Delayed hypersensitivity,
It is under delayed,
cell mediated.
last paragraph.
That's what I'm talking about. Is it the same thing as T cells?
So yes, cell mediated cytotoxicity is the same as the T cell. It involves only sensitized T cells. And when we talk about T cells, they are CD8 lymphocytes or killer T cells. So yes, sir,
All this-
they're all the same. This has a cool name of calling it killer T cell. But if you wanted to, technically you could call it a CD8 lymphocyte,
It's really good.
sir.
Nothing.
Okay, and so, yeah, so there was another question now. Was I trying to answer another question? I can't remember. Somebody have a question?
Oh, no, the last question before that was Suda's question.
Okay,
Humoral and.
did that get you? That makes sense to you on the answer to that?
Yeah, the T cells got to it.
Yeah. That's how I look at it. And when I say something like that, like how I look at it, this goes back to the day when I was in school. And I'm not going to necessarily tell you it's the right way to look at it, but it's how I studied. I had to make analogies in my head, and it's how I did it. So that's all I got on that. Come on. Yes, sir.
So when somebody's like,
That is one.
what is about the antigens like camouflage in the weight or something? Or what?
When they're asymptomatic,
Yes, what are asymptomatic, they have it, but it's not recognizing.
so right, it would depend on which disease process we were talking about. Like, it could be a couple of things. One, let's say a couple of things. So let's say one, let's use, I guess, COVID, for example. I'm asymptomatic. So the antigen's present, but it's not releasing certain chemical mediated response. It's there, but maybe it's not done that yet. Maybe it's preparing to do that, but it hasn't. That's one thing. The other thing could be like the AIDS virus. It's programming right now. It's reprogramming DNA. It's killing the killer T cells, right? And that's not releasing a chemical mediated response either. And then you catch something totally different. A bacterial cell comes in. That's when you get the inflammatory response. AIDS virus is there, but it's taking away your killer T cells. And so then you know something's up when they don't respond. So that could be something else. So asymptomatic can mean just that. You have it, but your body doesn't see it as a foreign invader yet, or it's not producing a chemical mediator for that. That makes sense?
So it's like just there.
It's just there.
Probably doesn't care.
Body doesn't care because it hasn't. Remember, in order to get chemotaxis, white blood cells have to alert on it. Somebody has to alert. And if they haven't alerted, that means they're probably not aware it's there. Even though we test you for something and find it there, your body's not aware of it. And there's probably some amazing viruses out there you can look up that are just like that, you know. That's pretty cool. I really love this stuff. I really do. I think it's amazing. Your body's so amazing. It is completely. I mean, imagine all it does. And I love all the sensors. I love how fever. Who would have thought your inner loopy goes up to your hypothalamus and knocks on the door? I mean, how does that happen? It's smart enough to know to turn up the heat, because that will work a lot of times. I mean, seriously, it will. So you can have some bad ass bacteria that kills people, and for you, it caught it in time, turned on the thermostat, and killed it before it even got started. Before you even got to the
It's like
doctor.
how they kill bed bugs.
Yeah.
Close the room up, seal it up, heat it up so hot. Kills
It
everything
does.
in there.
There's one bacteria, I forgot what it's called, that's the Mac Daddy, that even sterilization doesn't even kill. I forgot what it's called. Oh, yeah, it doesn't. It's like bring on the heat, man. I got you. I forgot. There's only one. But yeah. No, it's not that. It's something else. It's a bacteria. I forgot. I'll look it up. Yeah. Most of them, 99% of them respond to heat.
Is it a pathogen?
It is.
Pathogen?
It is. It's got. It's a name of a bacteria. Go ahead, Press.
Find out that, put that question on, that's another question.
Well,
Just ask.
I would, yeah.
I
No,
love
no.
when I don't care what it says.
He's, yeah.
I'm okay with it. I don't get it.
So yeah, so pretty cool stuff there.
Oh, just get some looking at you.
Weird, man.
Sorry.
That is a lot of hand sanitizer.
All right. Is there any questions on this stuff? I feel pretty good. Yes, sir.
This is still.
What's that?
It's still being recorded.
Yep. Yeah, it's still being recorded.
I just want to go watch.
We need something to drink to.
Every time. So it's inside.
Oops. It's a long night.
I got one, sir.
Sorry.
How much think we'll need to know about immune deficiencies?
I'll tell you what, I will have to look at the exam because I can't remember. What's that?
General immune deficiencies required.
Immune deficiencies. Yeah, I feel like that's the knowledge you have now, you should be able to kind of put it together. Because it's really not that. What you know now. Without this, it's terrible. I know, right?
Yeah, maybe let's go.
All right, so let's take another 15-minute break. Let me look up what we got going on. and kind of figure out where we're gonna go from here. I really like to go to the next chapter, but at the same time, the next chapter is, we're gonna do patient assessment next, followed by airway, but it's gonna be a short version of assessment because I'm basically gonna skim that with you guys. You've already had that chapter, but I want to go back over it.
I'm assuming it's the same.
All right, guys, I'm gonna take 15. This is where, just for the recording, I think I'm gonna stop this recording right now, and when we come back, I'll resume a new recording.
Hey. That's how you know I use my
Bloom?
voice.
Yeah.
You wanna, close this out? We'll close this out.
Bye.
All right, guys, be sure to like and subscribe. We do a video every day on the.
What is wrong with this camera? It's delayed or something.
Sale. Like I'm gonna sell you something.
Yeah.
I'm trying to fix something.
It is late. I need to reboot this thing.
Still streaming. 'Cause I'm gonna edit it and read over it at the same time.